Present your screen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Don't worry, Raghunath, we will accommodate you in an. I read your message. You are unable to unmute. Learn it. Then,
Screen.
yeah.
Rosaline, you have to present the screen. Share your screen.
Yes, yes, sir. Sorry.
Perfect. Please.
Okay. So in hydrology, the understanding of hydrological process, finding out the problems, and innovation in technology for problem solving are the proper definition of advanced research. So uh, today I'm going to present a research paper on the temporal variation of hydrochemical characteristics and assessment of groundwater quality through statistical and geospatial interpretation. It's a case study of Upper Kondwana Arbor Basin of Odisha. Uh, so here is the study area, and these are the sampling sites. The efficient management of water resource requires information about the water quality and its reliability, and the study aims to explore and understand the groundwater hydrochemistry, evaluate the quality comprehensively using statistical methods and through interpretation. The hydrological research has been carried out in Akbar Basin of Upper Gondwana Formation, covering an area of about 800 square kilometers in the state of Odisha. Geographically, it is present within the latitude 20 degree 45 minutes north to 20 degree north, and longitude 85 degree 30 minutes to 86 degree east. And 75 samples are collected in during the pre-monsoon, monsoon, and post-monsoon period of the year, and they all are analyzed through the standard analytical procedure. And the analytical values indicating the temporal variations were compared with the WHO and BIS standard to assess its suitability for domestic use. The hydrological phases were evaluated through the Piper-Tralinger diagram and Chadas diagram also. The statistical analysis include the systematic statistical correlation study, which will decipher the significant linear relationship among different pairs of water quality parameters. The analytical values were interpreted for assessment of groundwater for agronomic suitability, and the spatial distribution of average concentration of parameters were plotted using NavInfo software. So, this is a comparison of analytical values with the WHO standard, where we found most of the water samples comes under desirable limits, with few exception of carbonates and fluorides in some spaces and some places. Then for the hydrochemical analysis, the water quality data is analyzed through statistical distribution diagram, and such as Piper and Chadas diagram, by plotting the concentration of major cations and anions to get the better insights into the hydrochemical process operating in the groundwater flow system. And from the Piper-Tralinger diagram, we found the water belongs to calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonate phases, and the present study demonstrates the dominance of calcium bicarbonate. The prolific presence of calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonate ion depicts that the total hydrogeochemistry is dominated by alkaline arcs and weak acids, and the geochemical phases implies the weathering of carbonate mineral is the primary controlling factor representing the seasonal variations. Same in the Chadas diagram also, we found the phases of the water belongs to bicarbonate dominance and calcium magnesium type. In pre-monsoon also we found some chloride dominant. So here is the Piper-Tralinger diagram, and these clusters indicates the higher concentration of certain parameters. Okay, so here is in the pre-monsoon and post-monsoon period and post-monsoon that is, and this is a Sharad diagram. So it's by the statistical analysis, the correlation coefficient among various water quality parameters were done, and with the purpose of calculation of correlation coefficient, a correlation matrix was constructed by calculating the coefficient of different pair of parameters. The correlation coefficient near -1 or 1 means the strongest negative or positive relationship between the parameters. The assessment of water quality for agricultural purpose. For this, some interpretations are made. There is a potential soil salinity which can be calculated by the concentration of chloride and half of the sulfate ions, and from this we get these values. In pre-monsoon, it varies from 0.023 ppm to 3.367 ppm, and in monsoon and post-monsoon values are also under excellent to good, so excellent to good soil potential, and the sodium absorption ratio is also calculated for their as the sodium is an important parameter for the solubility, okay, or for the agricultural purpose, and these SAR values are calculated through this formula, and they are plotted against the EC in the electrical conductivity in the US salinity diagram classification, and here we get the different classification of water. So most of the waters fall under excellent to good water, and some are in the moderate water. So these are the water quality and 3 different periods. Sodium percentage. Here also the sodium percentage are calculated, and by the relations with the potassium, calcium, and magnesium, and these values are plotted against the electrical conductivity in the Wilcox diagram classification. And here we get the water.
Sorry, madam, for the disturbance. Only 3 minutes is left.
Okay, sir. Okay. So here we get the most of the waters are excellent, good, and permissible, and some are in the doubtful category. Then the lithohydrological relationship that can be established by the Gibbs diagram, which is very important because here the quality of water, or there are 3 kinds of fields are recognized. That is the water may be the precipitation dominant or the evaporation dominant and the rough water dominance, and from this classification we get the most of the waters are rough dominance, okay, rough dominance, and in seasons they show some precipitation dominance also. So some spatial distribution map are drawn which indicate the average concentration of physicochemical parameters throughout the area. So here the abnormalities are found in the fluoride, okay, and bicarbonate also shows some variation more than its desirable limit. So let's come to the conclusion. So wide range of standard deviation occurs for some parameters indicating the chemical composition of groundwater affected by the process, including rock water interaction and anthropogenic effect. So considering the complex variation in water quality, the 75 monitoring stations are grouped into 3 statistical significant clusters for characterizing the seasonal variation of the parameter in the group A, group B, and group C, where in group A parameters is shown an increase in concentration during pre-monsoon period. That is electrical conductivity, nitrate, chloride, and sodium. Okay, they show the higher concentration. And in group B, the potassium and sulfate, they show a gradual increase in concentration during monsoon period. Okay. And this may be due to the dilution of the percolating rainwater along with the fertilizers used in the cropland. And the group C parameters include the chloride, calcium, and total hardness. And these elements show high solubility, hence an increase in concentration is found in the water sample. And overall, we get the water phases, the hydrochemical phases, calcium, magnesium, bicarbonate type. In this area also, a fatty amines is present. So, so this also indicates the percentage of bicarbonate and dolomites are present in that region. So, magnesium content is obviously high in that region. So, from the assessment, it is inferred that present status of water quality of the region is more suitable for domestic and agricultural use, except few locations with a concern that it may deteriorate in near future. Okay. Thank you, sir. And this all.
Rosalind, thank you for a very informative talk. I think because we are not having a detailed discussion, I must suggest that your this abstract and presentation can mature to a good paper in a research journal. So you should try
Yes,
that. And, detailed questions will be sent to you once it is
Yes.
compiled by our report here. So really good work. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
And then we invite Martand Mani Mishra. Martand Mani Mishra जी हैं?
Yeah, good afternoon, sir.
जी ज्वाइन करें कृपया and start presenting. Martand जी है दिख रहा है. You can present your screen, huh? Perfect.
Okay, sir, my sir slide दिख रही है?
स्लाइड दिख रही है आपकी. आप प्रेजेंटेशन शुरू करें.
Okay. Good afternoon to all of you, respected professors, teachers, and my dear colleagues. I'm going to present my paper on the topic of assessing waterborne disease vulnerabilities in the blocks of Kalahandi district of Odisha. We all know that nowadays climatic factors and related impact on human health in the rural and tribal areas have become an area of prime concern in the research community. Among the climatic factors, rainfall, temperature, humidity has its impact on human health, and it's not a myth. Climatic factors and related impact and their role in deciding the morbidity and mortality related to vector-borne and water diseases are becoming a huge concern for the scientist community. So therefore we have decided to work on this topic, that how rainfall is impacting the disease pattern in one of the most socio-economic and disadvantaged district of this country. Kalahandi has become synonyms for poverty, starvation, and death in the country, and considered as one of the poorest districts in the whole country till the starting of 21st century. Several natural disasters render environmental problems, social and economical stress, and serious health issues to this place. So, keeping all these issues in the mind, this study seeks to address an insightful assessment of human health vulnerability caused by climatic and waterborne disease factors. In the waterborne diseases, we have selected two major diseases, that is diarrhea and typhoid. This is the study area. This Kalahandi district is located in the state of Odisha. Geographically, the district is divided into plain, land, hills, and mountains, consisting of mainly poor and tribal population. 28% of the population belongs to the scheduled tribe community, whereas 18% to the SC community. The district receives its maximum rainfall in the JJAS season, whereas annual average rainfall remains constant. So we have taken the 13 blocks of the district. separately to understand their vulnerability related to the exposure to waterborne disease and rainfall. Vulnerability assessment includes three components, majorly exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. In the exposure section, we have taken two components, that is rainfall and waterborne diseases. In the district, there exist two major waterborne diseases, that is diarrhea, I have mentioned, that is diarrhea and typhoid. Diarrhea has contributed to the highest morbidity and mortality among children younger than 5 years in the age. The present study focus on the calculation of VI, that is vulnerability index. We have selected several indicators from the environmental section, disease, demography, and infrastructure, and classify them into the three major category of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptivity. The indicators have been chosen based on the detailed literature review. These are the indicators. So we have majorly divided in three parts: component, profile, and indicators. In the component section, we have taken exposure, which is further divided in climatic and disease factor. Then we have taken sensitivity, which is further divided in two sections: vulnerable population, infrastructure vulnerabilities, and in the later part we have taken adaptive capacity, that is education and healthcare capacity. So we have taken several indicators from these profiles, and on the basis of this we have calculated the vulnerability index. We have applied the livelihood vulnerability index method, which is developed by Han. She did a study on Mozambique, and we tried to apply this methodology on our area. So this is the process of the calculation, and this is the result for the whole district. For looking at the pattern of rainfall in each block, we have calculated annual and seasonal average rainfall daily received for the last 31 years. It has been observed that the annual average rainfall is found to be moderate to high in the northern region of the district, that is Karlamunda and Madanpur block, in comparison to western and centrally located blocks. Bhawanipatna, Golamunda, and Kesinga blocks receive very less rainfall during the 31-year time period. When we look at the rainfall in the ISMR, that is Indian summer monsoonal rainfall season, it is quite different from the annual average. Low level of rainfall have been observed in the central, east, and west lying blocks, whereas it is moderate to high in the northern and southern blocks of the district. We have observed that Thuamal Rampur district, lying in the eastern region of the Thuamal Rampur block of the district, lying in the eastern region, has received maximum rainfall during the monsoon season, as well as in average annual calculation. Then we wanted to see the pattern of diarrhea in the district for each block. So we have found that southern part of the district, that is Dharmagarh, Koksara, and Jayapatna, and the northern region are less exposed in comparison to other blocks of the district. Madanpur Rampur block, lying in the extreme north, is highly exposed to diarrhea as well as typhoid. Now this is our final map, in which we have calculated the exposure, sensitivity, adaptive capacity, and the final vulnerability index map. So yeah, in the exposure section, we can see that the northern block, Madanpur Rampur, and the eastern lying block, Thuamal Rampur, is highly exposed to both the factor of climate and disease. Whereas in the sensitivity section, which include just a minute. Whereas in the sensitivity section, we can see that the southern lying blocks Suamal Rampur, Jayapatna and Koksara is highly sensitive in comparison to the northern lying and central lying blocks of the district. When we talk about the adaptive capacity, it plays an important role in understanding the vulnerability related to disease. Better adaptive capacity enhances the chances of lower vulnerability. Here, we have categorized this into section educational capacity and healthcare capacity. So after combining the both these section, we have found that Madanpur, Rampur and Lanjigal are the two blocks that have a higher adaptive capacity in comparison to other blocks. These two blocks are lying in the extreme north and eastern zone of the district. In the final CDVI value, we can see that the most vulnerable block of the district is Thuamal Rampur, whereas the least vulnerable block is Lanjigal, Dharmagar and Koksara. In the vulnerability index assessment, exposure and sensitivity plays an important role in increasing risk factor, whereas adaptive capacity reduces it. Waterborne disease like diarrhea and typhoid have become a serious challenge and cause of concern for the district and state administration. The relationship between rainfall and waterborne disease indicates that excess rainfall increases the risk of water contamination, which further leads to increase in the number of cases in a particular region. Contaminated water plays an important role in increasing the burden of public health, particularly in areas which are designated as tribal and backward.
Mr. Martin, sorry for the disturbance. 3 minutes is left for your presentation.
Okay, sir. Non-availability of proper healthcare and inequality in the quality of healthcare do not let this district to become prosperous. Waterborne diseases like diarrhea and typhoid are major contributors of morbidity and mortality in Kalahandi district of Odisha. By understanding the pattern of rainfall and waterborne disease, we can easily identify the blocks which are highly exposed to both these factors. Thus, this study has found that the effect of rainfall, vulnerable population, infrastructure, educational and healthcare capacity had a significant impact on the health vulnerability of the population. Though several pioneer works have been done to understand the exposure and relationship between waterborne diseases and rainfall, yet it is very difficult to find a systematic study on a tribal region that includes factor of sensitivity and adaptive capacity. Thus, this study is important, which applies the livelihood vulnerability assessment formula and uses the secondary data to assess the human health vulnerabilities in different blocks of the district. This method in the study of health vulnerability in the context to the exposure is expected to have higher degree of practical applicability. This study will be very helpful for the policymakers to identify the high vulnerable blocks of the district. Several lives can be saved through proper adaptation measures and better understanding of the disease pattern. Thank you.
Mr. Martin Mishraji, you made a very good presentation, and that too for a tribal region of India. Keep doing your good work. Let's invite the next speaker. We will collect the questions if it arises out of your work and communicate that to you. So the next speaker is Jinu Jose. Is the presenter here? I think Jinu Jose. Yeah, please. You may present your screen. Jinu, I think you are here. Please unmute your mic. Jinu, please unmute yourself. Yeah, perfect. And present your screen.
Vandu.
Yeah, there is an option of, yeah, perfect. Yeah, show your presentation now.
Good morning, sir. Is it visible?
Yeah, but your presentation is not visible. Your screen is visible. No, it was okay, Jinu. It was okay. Your screen was visible. You have to just start your PowerPoint.
Yes, it is.
Is it visible now?
You are presenting. Just wait. Yeah, please open your PowerPoint. Yeah, I think it's there. Presentation, Jinu Jose. Yeah, good. Start.
Sir, can I start? Hello.
Yeah, you are audible and visible both. Please
Okay.
start.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all. I am Jinu Jose. I'm research scholar in National Center for Earth Science Studies, Kerala. I'm here to present on assessment of toxic metal ions in Ashtamudi Ramsar wetland system, southwest coast of India. As we all know, wetlands are world's most productive, valuable, and sensitive part of environment. They host countless plants and animal species on which we humans are interdependent. Globally, continuous studies on wetland demonstrates that wetland area and quality continue to decline in many regions of world. Managing wetlands are becoming a global challenge, and on this note, 171 countries made an international treaty called Ramsar Convention, dedicated for the conservation of unique ecosystem. There are around 2,400 Ramsar sites around the world, in which my study area, Ashtamudi, is one among them. And population expansion and consequent urbanization results in the excessive influx of chemicals into the wetland. As a result, millions of people in and around urban areas get exposed to unhealthy environment. Surface sediments acts as both source and sinks for various kinds of pollutants in the aquatic environment. As a result, the study of surface sediment is a prime requirement for the assessing pollution load in the environment. I'm moving to the study area. Ashtamudi wetland system is a tropical estuarine wetland system located in the Kollam districts of Kerala state, and it is a wetland of international importance, and it is the second largest wetland in Kerala. The location of sediment samples are shown in the study area map. Area of the lake is around 61.4 square kilometer, and the main source of freshwater input to the Ashtamudi lake is Kallada River, and it drains into the Arabian Sea at Neendagara. And this lake is the deepest among all the estuaries of Kerala, with a maximum depth of 6.4 meter at confluence zone. And this lake is having a palm-shaped water body with many creeks and branches. And this Ashtamudi wetland system is divided into 4 sub-environments, that is the Ashtamudi main Kayal or the central Kayal, then Chavara Kayal, Koiripura Kananchara Kayal, Kumblathu Kanjikota Kayal. And moving to the sampling and methodology, 25 samples were collected from the georeferenced locations during monsoon and non-monsoon season. And these samples are analyzed for the toxic metal ion concentration using XRF model, And the samples collected were first dried in 60 degrees Celsius, then powdered using agate mortar, and it is then sieved using 230 mesh and then analyzed for LOE. After that, the samples were prepared for pressed pellet for the XRF, and the analytical results were compared with the average shale value by Turkey and Whirlpool, and is used for the used as the reference value for comparison. And moving to the field photos, this shows how the samples were collected in boat and using a surface sediment sample collected using Van Veen graph, and transferring the samples and how it is stored in the polythene cover. And moving to the contaminant geochemistry, that is, various indices were calculated to find out the contamination of sediments. First one is the contamination factor. The level of contamination of sediments by metals were calculated using this formula, and the contamination factor, the values calculated for each metals were compared with the Turkane and Whirlpool, with average shale value proposed by Turkane and Whirlpool. And there are 5 categories for this one. That is contamination factor. If it is less than 1, it will be low contamination. If it is between 1 and 3, it will be moderate contamination. If it is between 3 and 6, it will be considerable contamination. And if it is greater than 6, it shows very high contamination. The second indices used is the geoaccumulation index, or the IGO. The quantification of metal accumulation in the contaminated sediments were calculated using the formula. And in this formula, the CN is the concentration of each metal in the sediment sample, and BN is the background value. And the IGO values are classified in 7 classes according to the Muller. And these category is given. If the value is greater than 6, it will be extremely polluted. And moving to the next indices, that is the enrichment factor. To determine the metal enrichment in the sediments, this equation is used, and the category is given. If the enrichment factor is less than 2, it will be minimum enrichment for that metal. And if it is greater than 40, it will be extremely high enrichment. And the next indices used is the pollution load index, and it is calculated for each sampling location, and it is calculated using the contamination factor. And if the value is less than 1, it is unpolluted, and if it is that sampling location is unpolluted, and if the pollution load index value is greater than 1, it is polluted. Moving to the result and discussion, these are the elements analyzed using XRF, their units, their annual ranges, and the comparison with world average shale value proposed by Turkane and Whirlpool is shown. Then the contamination factor values calculated, their ranges, averages, the geoaccumulation index and enrichment factors are for each elements are calculated. Moving to the result and discussion, the value of contamination factor depicts that elements chromium, copper, nickel, iron, manganese, titanium belongs to the moderate contamination category, and zinc, cobalt, aluminum belongs to low contamination category. And high values of titanium, manganese were shown in monsoon season. And the value of geoaccumulation index reveals that the steady area falls in the unpolluted or moderately polluted category. The resulting enrichment factor shows that except chromium, all other elements fall in the minimal enrichment category. And the annual range of chromium is 81 to 219 ppm. And then the pollution load index suggests that 53% of the samples are polluted, that is, value is greater than 1. The overall results obtained from the study indicated considerable contamination and progressive deterioration. And if it's continuing, it will affect the ecosystem. So sustainable management measures need to be adopted in the wetland. These are some spatial distribution maps of chromium and manganese in monsoon and non-monsoon season. Chromium is mainly contributed by anthropogenic activities and from industrial and sewage disposal. Manganese are usually having natural occurrence and also extensive association with industry. Moving to the pollution load index, the spatial variation map is shown. In that, more pollution is it is calculated for each sampling location, and more pollution load is towards the inland region, and towards the coastal region it is less. It is due to the backwashing and dilution of elemental concentration by the seawater, and overall around 53% of the samples are having pollution load index greater than 1. And it is due to the severe heavy metal pollution due to the inflow of discharges from various sources, from point and non-point sources, and subsequently that get attached to the finer particles of the sediments. And these studies are in agreement with the other water quality and sediment quality studies of Ashtamudi wetland system, and mainly inputs of contaminants from industrial effluents, municipal sewages, coconut husk retting, waste disposals are identified in the Ashtamudi wetland system. And moving to the conclusion, the toxic metal ion prevalent in Ashtamudi wetland system by assessing various geochemical indices, and the results point out that there is considerable contamination in Ashtamudi wetland system, and this may be due to the high anthropogenic activities in the system by urbanization, domestic and municipal sewage, and drainage from the industrial area, and waste disposal. So therefore, effective management measures are urgently required to prevent further deterioration of Ashtamudi wetland system. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Oh, good. So I think you have finished before time. So this is Jinu Jose, and then okay, we were just discussing with the reporter, so maybe now we can invite Akhilesh, and after that one presentation was left, so we will invite that. Okay, so Akhilesh Kumar Yadav.
Yes, sir, I am here. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah. You have to mute your mic. Yeah. Okay. Akhilesh, present करें.
Good afternoon, everyone. Topic for my presentation is assessment of iron and manganese contamination in groundwater of aquifer located west of the river Yamuna. The study presented here focus on the spatial variation in iron and manganese concentration and its possible source in groundwater. Iron and manganese are the two of the most common elements in the environment, and thus humans are exposed to significant quantities of these metals that are present in food and water. The presence of iron and manganese in groundwater are commonly associated with rock and sediment. Major iron chemistry is the primary step for most of the groundwater quality studies, and a detailed discussion of these parameters could give more information about the hydrochemical variation in area. Various researchers confirm the elevated concentration of iron and manganese in the groundwater above the maximum permissible limit. Further, in study area, figure shows geology and geomorphological map of NCT Delhi and table stratigraphic succession of rock in Delhi. The lithostructural characteristics of the study area support the alluvial type of aquifer. The aquifer consists sand, silt, clay with calcareous nodules. Further methodology, the groundwater samples were collected in dry season from different locations in February 2019. The selection of location has been done on the previous work done by CPCB and CWP. Study here mainly focuses on sampling of groundwater sample aquifer location west of the river Yamuna. After collecting the sample, all samples carried out in laboratory and for physical chemical parameter and trace element water sample analyzed. Map showing here study conducted in groundwater sample location in Delhi. Further, in result, the paper diagrams showing composition of groundwater of aquifer, a mixed type of hydrochemical phases with sodium, magnesium, and sulfate dominance are observed. About 50% samples shows saline water type and 25% samples shows permanent temporary hardness water type. Further, in statistical correlation between physicochemical parameter and trace element, the positive correlation between chloride with sodium, calcium, and magnesium indicates possibility of significant geogenic influence on hydrochemical processes. The positive correlation of manganese with sodium, calcium, magnesium, chloride indicates possibility of geogenic origin of manganese in groundwater. Surprisingly, the negative correlation of iron with almost all other ions, including calcium, magnesium, indicates that the origin may not be geogenic. The minimum concentration of iron 0.175 and maximum 2.58 concentration were reported from the groundwater sample. About 6% of groundwater samples were beyond permissible limit for drinking water. In study area, minimum 0.03 and maximum 0.28 milligram per liter concentration of manganese was observed. All samples were within the permissible limit, while 33% of manganese samples showed value in between acceptable and permissible limit. The primary investigation of the spatial variation concentration iron and manganese is below. We categorize three concentration of iron and manganese in three parts: minimal, elevated, and high. Most of the groundwater samples comes under the minimal category of for iron, and about all groundwater samples comes in within the minimal category for manganese. Further, scatter plot with trend line for calcium, magnesium versus manganese and iron. In figure, the manganese shows with versus calcium magnesium graph shows the positive correlation. Positive correlation. It indicates the possible geogenic sources. While surprisingly, iron correlates negatively with calcium plus magnesium with maybe indicating either non-geogenic source or a complex hydrochemistry which needs to be evaluated. Further, scatter plot with trend line for nitrate versus manganese and iron. The anthropogenic sources of manganese is ruled out by the no significant correlation between manganese and nitrate. In between nitrate and iron shows the significant negative correlation, and it indicates anthropogenic sewer load pollution has not given rise to the iron anomaly. Further, in conclusion, the groundwater sample were taken from rural, semi-urban and industrial area located west of the river Yamuna. Majority of the area, iron and manganese contamination of the groundwater is well within the permissible limit. A mixed type hydrochemical phases with dominance of sodium and magnesium was observed. The positive correlation of manganese and with sodium, calcium, magnesium chloride indicates the possible geogenic origin. The negative correlation of iron with almost all other ions and calcium, magnesium indicates non-geogenic source of iron. It becomes complicated by the fact that iron correlates negatively with nitrate, indicating absence of sewer-based anthropogenic sources. Iron contamination is the groundwater system is an enigma which needs further scientific investigation. A detailed, significant, and water geochemistry is required for making concrete statement on the origin of iron and manganese. Thank you.
Okay. Achilles, are you over with your talk?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then we have one speaker who, because of some technical snag, he couldn't join, K. Raghunath. So, are you there, K. Raghunath?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Perfect. So, please try to join
Can you
now.
hear, sir? Can you hear, sir?
Yeah, you are audible. Please, Raghunath, please join.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Present your screen.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Good afternoon, sir. First of all, I am sorry for the technical fault before. Also, respected chairman and dear professors, participants, and my dear colleagues. I am Raghunath. My title of presentation paper is Groundwater Quality Evaluation associated with aggregate mines and quarries in Achankovel River Basin, South Kerala, India. Then the aim is to assess the seasonal extent, factors, and the sources causing the overall degradation of the regional groundwater resources associated with the live but abandoned aggregate quarries of the Midland stretches of the Achankovel River Basin, that is ARB, of Pathanamthitta district, South Kerala, India. It is the study area and sampling location, that is Achenkoval River Basin, Pathanamthitta district, along with the aggregate quarries and mines. That is the details of this area. That is the
Yeah, you need to zoom. You need to zoom. It's very small. Okay,
so
or maybe you give in a presentation mode.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. This location, that area, then the river length, then the river originated from Devarmalai of southwestern Ghats. River basin spans over 3 districts, that is Pathanamthitta 43%, Alappuzha district, that is 50%, and Kollam, that is 7%. Then the physiography, lowland, midland, and highland terrain. Geology is the important one. That is the Precambrian crystalline basement charlacites, hornblende, biotite gneiss, and garnet biotite gneiss. Tertiary sedimentaries and the quaternary deposits. Groundwater occurs in the crystalline aquifers and the rhyolitic conditions. Types of mining and quarrying is performing here is the terrestrial rock quarrying of crushed aggregates, laterite, bricklay, dimension stone, and the riverside and the gravel mining. Then the sample specification with respect to quarry sites. That is the quarry site, that is name, local name. That quarry is Darshan Quarry, Vinayaka Granites, Johnson Rocks, Chengalat Granites, Chathmel Kuti Red Brick Quarry, Adukad Granites, Darshan Quarry with the Vinayaka Granites, Johnson Rocks. Then the Kokatoda Kotambara, it is another one, Champala Forest Division. Here, this with the sample code, that is Darshan Quarry with the ADW, that is Dagwell sample from Darshan Quarry, Vinayaka Granites, Johnson Rocks, Chengalat Granites, and Chathmel Kuti Brick Quarry, then Adukad Granites. Then the borewell samples are near to Darshan Quarry, Vinayaka Granites, Johnson Rocks, Kokatoda Kotambara. Then Kokatoda Kotambara and the Champala Forest Division, it is the reference control well samples away from the quarry mine sites for the reference. The materials and methods. 9 aggregate quarries were selected for the study. Seasonal pre-monsoon, monsoon, and post-monsoon season. Groundwater samples 6 duct wells, there is ADW, and 3 borewell samples, including the 6 duct well samples. Then from quarry surroundings and 2 control well samples, that is ACW, far away from quarry vicinity, were collected and analyzed. Data generated on primary and secondary sources by field study, including field characteristics, varied quarry crushing practices and types. Then physico-chemical lab analysis for critical water quality parameters. Then pH, TDS, turbidity, that is chlorine, total alkalinity, total hardness, phosphate, nitrate, fluoride, lead, thorium, then salinity and method elements, that is calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium were determined. These are compared with the standard and computed water quality index through RL weightage, WI, then quality index QI, and sub-index SI with a computation formula. WQI is equal to sigma I to N SI. That is SI is equal to WI into QI. Quality rating QI is equal to C and SI into 100. Then CI is the concentration of individual parameter. SI is the individual B standard. Then then the analysis of phytochemistry, physico-chemical parameters and nutrient analysis. Parameters then pH, TDS, turbidity, salinity, and NO3 by in situ checkup by portable water quality probe. Nutrient status by continuous flow analyzer CFA. Trace metals by microplasma, atomic emission spectrophotometer and pH. Then the results and discussion. Field study. A total of 148 working quarries, 25 crusher units, and 252 abandoned quarry pits are identified and accounted in the study area. Mining, quarrying, and crushing activities of terrestrial hard rock crystallites and laterite bricklays for crushed aggregates, that is stone and gravel, dimension stones and fluvial aggregates and gravel are going on at different locations in the highland, midland, and the lowland physiographic structures of the Achenkoval Basin of Pathanamthitta district. Dewatering is a common practice in most of the aggregate mines and quarries in the study area, leading to the intervention with the groundwater regime. It may be one of the reasons for the reported concern of water scarcity, regional lowering of water table, and quality deterioration in the nearby wells and ponds. Then the hydrochemical lab analysis, the groundwater samples, that is Dagwell and borewell, at the selected mining and quarrying vicinity areas of ARB facing water scarcity and quality problems in all seasons. Then the groundwater at the stone aggregate quarrying vicinity have an acidic level of pH, that is 4.53 to 6.98, and a higher concentration level of most of the critical quality parameters such as turbidity, that is 1 to 4 in quarry sites, means aggregate quarry sites. Chloride content, that is 0.56 to 1.33 milligram per liter, TDS 89 to 329 milligram per liter, total hardness 24 to 187 milligram per liter, total alkalinity 98 to 486 milligram per liter, chloride, that is 215 to 662 milligram per liter, silicate 4.3 to 322 6.15 milligram per liter, phosphate, that is negligible, and NO3 is also not in this stage. And the moderate concentration of thorium, that is 0.03 to 0.08 milligram per liter, and the higher concentration of lead, 0.01 to 0.03 milligram per liter, which exceeds the acceptable level with respect to the control samples in the quarry vicinity town seasons. The groundwater samples at the quarry locations are observed with the enrichment parameters such as turbidity, chloride, sodium, fluoride, lead, and thorium. That is the level of thorium, than the permissible limit of this in comparison with the non-quarrying reference locations, that is ACW 10 and 11. pH at the vicinity of stone quarrying sites of ARB were moderately acidic. That's okay, I've also repeated. The concentration of nitrite was noted higher in borewell samples, and the highest was noted in the APW8 at Vinayaka quarry locations in Mandsaur. The concentration of alkali metals, that is calcium 8 to 116 milligram per liter, and the calcium hardness 486 milligram per liter in ABW8 is higher in many of the samples subjected to the present study. The highest is in the Vinayaka granite quarry site. This is due to the geological influence of feldspar enrichment also in the host of the study area. The fluoride content of the groundwater is in the range of 0.56 to 1.33 milligram per liter. That is, this study is only 0.6 to 1.2. With the highest fluoride level at the Johnson quarry site, that is borewell site of 1.33 milligram per liter, which is above the permissible limit, and the lowest at the Vinayaka quarry site, that is ABW2, that is 0.56 milligram per liter, which is below desirable limit. The thorium enrichment of the
Why your slides are not moving? Your slides are not moving. Mr. Dr. Raghunath,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is not moving, sir?
No, it's at the same slide, slide number 3.
Raghunath, we are seeing the same slide for long.
Yeah. Now it's moving. So I think you have to keep moving.
You forgot perhaps to move the slides.
Okay.
Okay, now okay, sir?
No, now it's okay.
Then the overall, okay, sir. Thank you, sir. The overall assessment of the water quality index values of the groundwater samples in the study area of Achankora Basin at the quarry vicinity showed that 78% are in good quality and 22% are in poor quality for domestic consumption. Most of the hydrochemical parameters in the groundwater in the quarry vicinity of Achankora Basin were found comparatively more in monsoon than other seasons. This is probably due to the mixing of surface pollution, dissolution, and infiltration from quarries. The comparative analysis with the control samples, that is, all critical water quality parameters are within the limit, which is confirmed the impact of quarries on groundwater aquifers nearby. The comparative higher concentration of the hydrochemical parameters in the borewell samples at the quarry vicinity may be due to the dissolution, infiltration, and percolation of ions through the tectonic joints and cracks to deep aquifers in the study area of the ARB. The quarry operations below water table and thereby dewatering leads to the majority of the shallow and deep aquifers therefore become dry, even in monsoon. In the upper reaches of the Midland Basin, due to the regional lowering of water table and altering the recharge path, dissolution and infiltration thereby deteriorate the quality. So, the reckless, unscientific, and unregulated aggregate mining and quarrying in Achankora Basin urgently calls for the imposing and follow-up of environmental regulations to protect the ongoing depletion and degradation of water sources of the region. This is the graphical presentation. That is the 3 locations we can see in this sector. That is the granite quarry sites and the clay mines quarry. The clay mine quarry is more impacting to the degradation of the quality than the TDS level. All are in the same center level. We can find out. Then the seasonal individual parameters, hydrochemistry parameters, I have calculated individual wells one by one. That is 11. That is 9 quarry sites, and 10 and 11 are the only control wells. These control well samples itself, it is depicting that They are all are in the under the standards and below. And also the WQI computation is also calculated by this method. That is the WQI computation status of Ori province, Achangolwar basin. That is all parameters. That is QISA calculation. Then this and after the WQI status, and these are all. These are all. Sir. Thanks. Thank you very much, sir.
You're finished?
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Shashank, he has finished.
Okay, sir.
Okay, nice. You had a very detailed slide, and I think with you, the pre-lunch session we have finished, and we have 15 minutes for question answer, which we had kept in the end. And I see in the chat box a lot of question has come for Dipankar Saha. So maybe we can invite him back if he is here. Saha, I see he was there. And put the questions to him, either the audience themselves or I will read for him.
Okay, please.
Sir, the first is from Mr. Prem Kumar. Why has the water-rich eastern states failed to grow paddy and wheat insufficient? I'm reading from the chat box, sir. If you can also open it and have a look.
Yeah.
Or before that, if just a minute, okay, fine. If some faculty member have a question, Professor Sinha is here, Professor Pankaj Srivastava is here, Dr. Asutosh is here. They can also put the question directly. Before if you have a question, then I will read the chat box after that.
Well,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Saha, I was there in your presentation, and you have been at the helm of affairs in groundwater. Some of your suggestions that the political people should understand, and they should make some laws to regulate the groundwater extractions and all these things. I hope that during your illustrious career, you must have had several occasions where you would have met the bosses and the political leaders and the ministers. So is it still a suggestion, or there is some kind of a progress in implementation about this precious source of groundwater, which I consider even more important than oil, on which we have so many embargoes? But groundwater, as you said rightly, that despite the canals being provided by government, every villager is having a tube well and extracting this precious groundwater. So what is actually our status? Shall we keep on suggesting and seeing this kind of things happen?
Sir, thanks for your question. It's a bit difficult question. And, if we talk about the regulation of groundwater extraction, the 90% I told you the extraction is happening for agriculture, and about 6 to 7% for domestic, and the remaining for industries. Now, there was a famous case, you all remember, that Mr. Mehta has filed a PIL, and against that the Central Groundwater Authority has been created. But the Central Groundwater Authority's mandate is to regulate the groundwater extraction. But the regulate groundwater extraction means you can regulate for extraction, for domestic, for industry, for agriculture. But because of the various reasons, and it is well understood to all of us, but we cannot discuss it openly, that nobody is very much interested to touch the groundwater regulation for agriculture, which is consuming 90%. And the Central Groundwater Authority and even the National Green Tribunal is all tightening the screw for the industries only, where the extraction is very less, though they are maybe concentrated, and where the industries are there, surrounding areas are immediately affected. But overall scenario, the entire tightening of screw is affecting the industries. In agriculture, there is hardly any regulation by government of India. But at the same time, I would say there are certain indirect measures that is being taken place and taken up both state government and central government, where the more emphasis is being given on groundwater savings rather than groundwater extraction, but they are not direct. Nobody has got the courage to tell a farmer that you have to pay a price for the water you are extracting, or you have to regulate your extraction. They are trying to do in other way. I will give you 2-3 examples. One example is very, very innovative Atal Bhujal Yojana. Atal Bhujal Yojana, for the first time, the incentive is being given on the quantity of groundwater that is being saved. You know, till now, all the subsidies or facilities by government and the state government was on groundwater extraction. You drill a well, you will get subsidy. You drill a well, you will get free electricity, something like that. But here, the Atal Bhujal Yojana, you save groundwater and you prove it, then you take money. Then there are different agronomic practices going on. You know, a lot of subsidies are being given on drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, even up to 70%. Then the Jyotigram Yojana, which is being say upscaled throughout India, that the separation of the feeder line of electricity for the agricultural wells and for the domestic wells. Then even say like if you see the Haryana and Punjab Subsoil Water Act 2009, both the state has adopted and trying to implement it, that lot of groundwater pumping was occurring in the state of Punjab and Haryana during the pre-monsoon season, because the nursery of paddy or rice was 15 to 20 days earlier than the monsoon arrival. So now the government is telling that you shift the nursery or the replantation of the paddy more coinciding with the arrival of monsoon, and for that incentives are also there. So indirectly the government is trying. And another very encouraging thing is, if you see the trend of the rise of minimum support price of the food grain, you will find there is marginal rise in the paddy or wheat, but there is substantial rise in the MSP for the low water intensive nutri-nuggets, nutri-cereals like say bajra, jowar. So crop diversification, also government is telling farmers that you grow more less water intensive crops, nutri-cereals, and that's why they have increased the MSP price. So the way is difficult, and it is very, very challenging to control the groundwater extraction in agriculture and irrigation. But government
thank you so much for a very elaborate answer. And just one line answer to my apprehension about India is a diabetic hub in the world, that we have the maximum number of people suffering from diabetes. And still we are so much loving the sugarcane production. And sugarcane, you know that, because I am not an expert, but I have heard that sugarcane is the killer of groundwater. And it takes maximum this Pepsi and other the companies. And sugarcane, once I travel to Western Europe, UP, I see the trucks and trucks of sugarcane are being, so much of sugar we are producing, we are so much diabetic, and it is affecting the groundwater also. So is there any policy of the government to control sugarcane production?
Sir, we are all aware about the very, very powerful sugarcane lobby in the western Uttar Pradesh as well as in Maharashtra and also in Karnataka. So they are very powerful lobby, but it all depends on us. That's why the final question is, I will request you that you can invite for one Zoom presentation of Francisca Harris. Recently, we organized a webinar on virtual water. She has done wonderful research on virtual water and the export of food grains from India to other states as well as different states. And ultimately, the conclusion is the key to success is lying on us. if we change our food habit, then only say, as long as we are going to take chocolates and Pepsi and Coke, then how the government will control? Let us change our food habit and let us change our the choice of the
Dr. Shah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are telling many big things. We have seen the recent farmer agitation. We have seen the recent how we behave in Corona time. So rather than talking very big things, how you better concentrate how the big things be implemented, because nobody listens to us. Nobody listens to the scientists. Nobody listens to. Do you feel that any major committee we call any major scientists to give any advice? No. Even in the Corona time, the medical board for the vaccination has no viral expert, virus expert. We are all heart specialists. We have medicine. They are forming the committee. So rather than, so if you say the farmers will not take water, then you understand the repercussion for that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But at the same time, you see, what is the logic that the basmati will be grown in Punjab and Haryana and they will be exported? But if you want to tell this thing to farmers immediately, there will be an agitation because everybody wants to live in its comfort zone. But at the same time, you see Kutch, how they have transformed their agriculture. They are all in cash crop production or horticulture. They have shifted. But obviously, the Punjab and Haryana, they will also change. It will take time. But obviously it's a very difficult. But when you talk about policy, then obviously the issues will come, and issues are in a big country with 130, 140 crore population. So if the issues come, that has to be big, is not it? You see, I remember once during my tenure, the ambassador of Israel came and he was giving a lot of sermons and lectures in one occasion that in Israel we are doing so much water conservation and this thing, that thing. Then one gentleman told that the entire water circulation in India is less than the water circulation in our Golden Temple in Amritsar. So in India, the scale for everything is big, and any discussion, if you go, it has to be big. So many people may feel that these are big talks, but anyway, these are the problems, and we
have to live with it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, if we are over with this, then before reading the questions in the text, other people in the audience, I think Monica has just texted something. Monica, why don't you ask? And then I will read the student's question. Monica?
Sir, my audio is bad actually, so it's not
okay, I'll read for you.
Very good. So that is why I wrote it.
Okay, I read for you. Monica writes, Dipankar sir, we have a lot of studies based on water use efficiency, but how do we get that implemented? How do we reduce the gap?
Congratulations.
Okay, how do we reduce the gap between scientists and farmers? Maybe mobile app? That's the question, sir.
You see, scientists and farmers is, I don't know how we will take it, but there must be. I am not entering into the debate of the recent farmers' agitation or the reform in the agriculture and irrigation sector, but there must be some big ticket reform is required in the water sector, in agriculture sector, and in irrigation sector. But dear Monica Gupta, if we only talk about scientists and technologists, I must say, after spending say 30-40 years in a hardcore groundwater department, the groundwater lies beyond the science and technology. The science and technology, of course, is a very important aspect, but when you come to the application part, its socio-economic is absolutely important. Then community management is also important. Then the environment and ecology is also very important. I am not entering into detail in this discussion, but somehow the reform in the agriculture and water resource sector is not happening, though a lot of reform has taken place in the aviation sector, in the tax sector, in the petroleum sector. But you see, water sector, there was a restructuring committee report, very eminent writer, the thinkers of water, they have prepared a report, and the report is gathering dust for last 3 years. And there are a lot of new things that has come up in the report, and complete restructuring of the water resource ministry, so that the water resource management comes out of the typical bureaucratic control to the scientists, to the technologists, and even to the sociologists, economists who are working relentlessly for solving the water problem. To me, the India in such a stage, if they want to solve the water resource problem, water problem, sustainable use, they have to target agriculture, and reform is needed. And what is happening to Jal Jeevan Mission, it is open to all. You know, such an ambitious scheme by Government of India, lakhs and lakhs, crores of rupees pipes are being procured, taps are being fixed, overhead tanks are being constructed. But now everything is coming down to the sustainability of the source, because the main dependence is on groundwater, and the state government departments who are executing these projects, they are all manned by the surface water engineers. They don't have any idea of groundwater. They know how to construct a tank, how to lay a pipeline, how to fix a tap, but they don't know which aquifer water is there and how to make it sustainable. So it's a huge and complex problem, and lot of reform is required in our country in water and agriculture sector to bring water, science, technology all together.
Okay.
It was a very nice one. Professor Prasad conducted it very nicely before the time, and everything went on very smoothly. Now we have a break here in this session, and that Shashank session is still going on with some questions, and then we will have a lunch break, and we will reassemble at 2 o'clock. With I think Dr. Rajiv Sinha will start the keynote.
Yeah.
आपका कैसा रहा? दूसरा मीटिंग कैसा रहा?
No. I will communicate the rest of the questions to Dr. Saha.
Sure.
No, is Pankaj sir? I think he is in communication with another meeting.
अच्छा.
I don't know.
I think it's going on smoothly. I think if it goes on, then I think
No.
we'll be happy that.
Well, he is in some other conversation. Looks, his mic is on.
Sir, a request to all that we should come out of the we have become a slave of wheat.
That was excellent, and Professor Joshi maintained his time.
Pankaj, please mute yourself.
I think there is some problem. He's not.
Yeah, he has muted.
Oh, he is muted.
Saha, it was wonderful listening to you.
Yeah.
Excellent, and from such a senior person like you, your perspective on groundwater really has opened our eyes. That you are correct that the groundwater is having a lot of things with socio-economic condition of the country, and we cannot bring only science here. There are a lot of issues you people may be facing. Thanks for your elaborate answers.
Right, sir. And some of the rocking stars in groundwater, many of them are not from the science and technology. So if you listen to Tushar Shah, if you listen to Meet Shah, if you listen to Himanshu Kulkarni, there are many dimensions of groundwater. And since it is a distributed resource, the importance and participation of community is so important that you cannot ignore it. So it has got, and then environment, ecology, e-flow, many dimensions.
Yes, truly, sir.
Yeah, Saha sir, I will send you the rest of the questions because we have lunch hour from 1:15, and there are 4 questions pending. But quickly, we can take one if it's very urgent. If somebody is with a great that I have to ask this, then one question is allowed, and then we end this. Or I will email you.
No, somebody was asking about the paddy in the eastern region of India.
Yeah. So the question was, why has the water-rich eastern states failed to grow paddy and wheat in sufficient. I think this is the last, and then we will send you by email.
Yeah. You know, we have to go back to our green revolution, and there is lot of discussion is going to happening on our green revolution, whether the green revolution was a great success or whether the green revolution has made us a slave of rice and wheat, paddy or wheat. And the all success of green revolution was there in the northwestern part of India. They got electricity, they got connection, they got borewells, they got canal, everything. And the eastern part remained neglected for irrigation infrastructure creation. And that has got a tradition. And now they are coming up. You know, the Madhya Pradesh is the highest wheat producer now. Chhattisgarh is coming up very strongly. West Bengal is very strong in production, paddy production. But the Punjab and Haryana, they produce paddy and they export also a lot. So they have got an economic angle to that.
Okay, sir. Thank you for this. I think we will end the session. And again, thanking you for sparing time. There are 3 more questions. I will send them to you because that will take a lot of time. I think then we can discuss that. Virendra, you have to say something?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay, then again, we thank the esteemed keynote speaker and for a lively discussion we had. I have a question in my mind, but I will discuss that with you separately because we are running late for the lunch. Now we have already crossed 5 minutes.
If it is one-line question, we can have a one-line answer.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much for sparing time and being with us. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for patient hearing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We meet after lunch now. I think we have only 15 minutes for lunch. Pankaj sir, shall we log out and rejoin or shall we be here?
I'm here. I'm very much here. I was really enjoying the discussion and also some of the talks where I could.
No. I'm asking, shall we log out and rejoin or shall
No, there is no need. There is no need. You can continue. If you have got a good net, you can continue. The same login, you can continue.
Okay, so we will have a lunch and then we will continue in the same login. Huh?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we break for lunch now, quick lunch, because there is very little
you
time.
can have full lunch, yeah.
Yeah. That's good. I am hungry by now. Okay, we meet after lunch now. Okay. Thank you all for being here and cooperating in conduct of this session. Thank you very much. Virendra, we need to copy these questions and send to Dr. Saha from the text box because the moment we log out, they will vanish. Virendra is not here, I think. Okay.
Yes, sir. I will do, sir.
Please copy these questions and we will email it to him separately because it would have gone for hour. It's water sector, no?
Okay.
So policy-based discussion takes very long time. So let's reassemble. What is the time of next time?
2 o'clock, sir.
Oh no! So you have only half an hour, 40 minutes for lunch. So let's reassemble, huh? Okay. So maybe we will rejoin at 2. That's better. What do you suggest, Virendra?
Yes, sir. 2 o'clock is okay, sir.
Okay, I am online. I will go to my computer goes to sleep. I think
okay,
that works.
Sir.
Okay.